The instructor said no species can dual-wield.
Members of
She
the
picked up
Galactic
2
Council,
swords. Define
honored
can't.
guests, thank you
Ships
for
from
joining
countless
us
worlds
today.
docked at its enormous hangars, their crews hurrying inside to prove themselves. Among them, Lyra moved with quiet determination. She was small for a human, barely 5 feet 4 inches, with hair the color of dark copper and eyes that shone with a mix of intelligence and stubbornness. Other species towered over her, muscular reptilians, 6-limbed avians, and beings made entirely of shifting energy, but Lyra did not shrink. She had learned early that humans were underestimated. She intended to use that. The training hall was enormous, a sphere of polished metal with holographic targets and combat simulators lining its walls. A crowd of cadets gathered in the center, their various forms and colors making the place look like a living rainbow. Lyra adjusted her grip on her training sword, feeling the weight of it settle in her hands. She carried only one for now, not because she believed the instructor's warnings, but because she had to be careful. One misstep could ruin her chances. Commander Zorath, a towering alien with obsidian scales and 6 arms, strode into the hall. Every step he took made the floor vibrate slightly. His eyes, a deep luminescent purple, scanned the crowd and landed on Lyra. His gaze lingered longer than it did on most cadets. No species can dual-wield, Zorath said, his voice resonating in the hall. It is impossible. Coordination fails, strength fails, timing fails. Humans do not attempt it. You will only embarrass yourselves. Lyra's fingers tightened around her sword, her jaw set. She had expected this. Every human cadet faced similar ridicule, especially when the topic of dual-wielding came up. The aliens prided themselves on their natural physical advantages, extra arms, superior reflexes, or bodies that could bend time in ways humans could not. Humans had none of that, yet they had something every alien species underestimated: creativity, ingenuity, adaptability. Lyra raised her chin and stepped forward, though she knew the other cadets were watching. Some laughed. Others, the smaller or less confident ones, whispered encouragement she could barely hear. Zorath's 6 eyes narrowed. "Do you understand me, human?" he asked. "Dual-wielding is forbidden. It cannot be done." Lyra's voice was calm, but it carried a fire that startled even herself. "Define can't," she said. A ripple of laughter passed through the hall, but Zorath did not smile. Instead, his gaze sharpened. "You will find out soon enough," he said, and waved the crowd toward the sparring zones. The other cadets paired off quickly, some showing off with flashy moves, others hesitating with nervous energy. Lyra watched them carefully, memorizing their patterns. She had learned that observation was half the battle. Humans might lack raw power, but they could learn faster than anyone else. After the initial rounds, Lyra found a quiet corner of the training hall, a space where no one usually trained. She placed her sword down and retrieved a second one, hidden beneath her training cloak. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear but excitement. This was the moment she had been waiting for, practicing in secret for weeks. She lifted both swords, one in each hand. At first it felt awkward. Her arms felt uncoordinated, her strikes uneven. She stumbled, almost losing her balance. But she kept trying, adjusting her stance, letting her instincts guide her movements. She remembered the advice her older brother had given her years ago, back on Earth. "It's not about strength," he had said. "It's about thinking ahead, using what you have, and never letting anyone tell you what you can't do." Lyra's arms moved faster now, the sword slicing through the air in patterns she had designed herself. She imagined an opponent in front of her, swinging multiple attacks at once. With one sword she blocked, with the other she struck. She adjusted her grip, her stance, her footwork. Every motion felt deliberate, precise, and increasingly natural. Hours passed without anyone noticing. Lyra's muscles ached, her arms burned, but she did not stop. By the time the hall's lights dimmed for the evening, she could move with the grace of a dancer, her 2 swords acting as extensions of her own body. She smiled. She was getting there. The next morning, the instructors organized a demonstration. Cadets would showcase their skills to the entire academy. Lyra had a decision to make: show her dual-wielding now or wait for the right moment. She decided to wait. There was no point in proving herself to a skeptical crowd if she could wait until the stakes were higher. The demonstration began with one-on-one matches. Lyra observed carefully, noticing how her peers moved. The reptilians relied on brute strength, often telegraphing their attacks. The avians used rapid strikes but lacked stamina. The energy beings could phase in and out of attacks, but their precision was inconsistent. Humans were the smallest group, and many struggled with coordination and strength. Lyra's turn came. She stepped into the arena with a single sword. Her opponent was a hulking alien, twice her size and covered in spiny armor. The crowd gasped. Many assumed she would fail. She smiled politely, acknowledging the audience, and then focused on her opponent. The alien charged. Lyra dodged and parried, moving with speed and flexibility. She did not try to overpower her opponent. She used angles, misdirection, and timing. With each block and counter, she gained confidence. The alien swung wildly, frustrated that the human was keeping pace. Finally, Lyra feigned a stumble, baiting the alien into overextending. In that split second, she struck a precise blow to the alien's shoulder joint. It faltered, giving her an opening to end the match. She did so gracefully, without excessive force. The hall erupted in whispers. Some were impressed, others skeptical. Zorath watched silently, his expression unreadable. After the match, Lyra returned to her private training area. She picked up both swords again. She had proved something to herself, even if no one else knew yet. Her hands moved almost instinctively, weaving patterns that no alien had seen. She imagined scenarios, multiple attackers, attacks from above, behind, and from both sides. With dual swords, she could block and strike simultaneously, something no other species could do naturally. It was late when she finally put down her swords, exhausted but exhilarated. Sweat dripped down her face, but she grinned. "Can't," she whispered to herself, "is just a word." The next day, the Academy announced a special sparring tournament. Cadets would compete in mixed-species teams, testing strategy, adaptability, and skill. Lyra's heart raced. This was her chance. She knew the other cadets would expect humans to be outmatched. They would not anticipate what she had been preparing in secret. During the team selection, whispers followed her. "She's a human, small, weak. No human can keep up with a reptilian or an avian in combat." Lyra ignored them. She had learned that words from others meant little when action could speak for itself. Her team included a bulky reptilian named Kor, a nimble avian called Sierra, and a crystalline energy being named Thal. Each was confident, but wary of the human in their group. Lyra studied their abilities carefully, noting their strengths and weaknesses. Humans might be physically weaker, but they could coordinate, think ahead, and innovate. That was their advantage. The tournament began with a simulated battlefield, holographic enemies attacking from all sides. Lyra moved with precision, dodging a drone's laser blast and countering with her sword. She realized she could attack one side while blocking another. With dual swords, she moved like a living storm, unpredictable and swift. Her team watched in astonishment as she simultaneously blocked Kor's wide swings, deflected Sierra's rapid attacks, and adjusted to Thal's energy projections. Lyra was everywhere at once, or so it seemed. Her human's instincts for improvisation allowed her to adapt to multiple threats faster than any alien could. The round ended. Their team had survived with minimal injuries, while most other teams struggled to keep pace. Whispers turned to murmurs of respect. Even Zorath's eyes flickered with something approaching interest. Lyra knew she had only begun. Dual-wielding was not merely a skill, it was a statement. A human could take the impossible and make it reality. Every challenge, every sneer, every doubt was fuel for her determination. That night, Lyra sat in her quarters, the two swords leaning against the wall. She stared at them, imagining all the possibilities. The Academy was vast, the galaxy wider, and humans were seen as small, fragile, and predictable. But she knew better. Humans adapted. Humans created. Humans did not accept limits unless they chose to. Tomorrow, the next challenge awaited, and Lyra was ready. She would not simply participate, she would redefine what was possible. The instructor had said humans couldn't dual-wield. Lyra smiled softly and whispered again, "Define can't." And in the darkness of her room, the spark of something greater than mere skill began to burn. A spark that would grow into a flame capable of changing the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Lyra woke to the soft hum of the Academy's life systems. The artificial sun bathed her quarters in a pale golden glow, and she stretched her arms, still feeling the ache from yesterday's rigorous training. Her mind was already running through the patterns she had practiced, the movements of her two swords dancing in her imagination. Every night she had gone over her technique, imagining herself in real combat situations. Now it was time to take it further. She made her way to the training hall. The other cadets were already there, warming up with their weapons, practicing their usual drills. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Today, the instructors had announced cadets would engage in adaptive combat exercises, tests designed to challenge creativity, strategy, and improvisation. Lyra watched carefully as the other species went through the motions. The reptilians swung their massive arms with precision and brute force. The avians darted through the air, their winged bodies moving with speed, but often leaving predictable gaps in their defense. The crystalline beings could shift their forms to avoid attacks, but their movements were limited by their own rigid structures. Humans, on the other hand, were considered the weakest, and most struggled to even land a clean strike. Lyra adjusted the grip on her two swords. She felt the familiar weight in her hands and let her mind settle. With humans, she reminded herself, the advantage was never strength. It was the ability to adapt, to improvise, to see openings others overlooked. Today, she would push herself further than ever before. The instructors blew a whistle, and the exercises began. Cadets were paired off, their performance being monitored by holographic sensors that recorded every move, speed, and reaction. Lyra's opponent was a seasoned reptilian named Cathar, known for his heavy swings and relentless attacks. He was twice her size and easily 10 times stronger. Most humans would have faltered immediately, but Lyra didn't flinch. As Cathar lunged, she sidestepped, one sword blocking a crushing blow while the other countered in a quick strike aimed at his exposed flank. Her movements were fluid, almost like water flowing around a rock. The reptilian roared in frustration, unable to anticipate her unpredictable rhythm. Lyra began to notice something crucial. The other species relied on repetition. Their attacks followed patterns ingrained by centuries of natural evolution. Humans had no such limitation. Our minds, she realized, could break those patterns. By constantly varying her attacks and defenses, she created openings where none should exist. Each movement became a puzzle Cathar couldn't solve, and slowly the tide of the duel turned. By the time the exercise ended, Lyra had scored points no human had ever achieved against a reptilian opponent. She lowered her swords and caught her breath, a small smile forming on her lips. Around her, some cadets stared in disbelief. Even instructors were murmuring among themselves, but there was no time to revel in victory. The next challenge was worse. Lyra's team was called to participate in a coordinated combat simulation. Multiple enemies would attack from all sides. This time, success depended not only on individual skill, but also on team coordination. As they prepared, Lyra studied her teammates. Kor, the reptilian she had sparred with before, looked uneasy. Sierra, the avian, stretched her wings nervously, while Thal, the crystalline being, glimmered with uncertainty. Lyra knew they respected her growing skill but were wary of her unconventional methods. She had to lead them, not just fight alongside them. The simulation started. Holographic drones surrounded them, attacking from every direction. The team hesitated initially, unsure how to respond to the chaotic pattern of assaults. Lyra's heart pounded, but her mind was calm. She took a deep breath and moved. With her dual swords, she became both shield and blade. One sword deflected a drone's energy beam, while the other struck at a weak point. She moved constantly, adapting to every attack, every movement of the drones. Kor found himself able to swing with more precision, because Lyra's coordination allowed him to focus on fewer targets at a time. Sierra adjusted her aerial attacks to complement Lyra's patterns, striking from angles Lyra could not cover. Thal's energy projections filled in gaps, forming a web of control that made the drones' attacks chaotic and ineffective. The team began to synchronize, guided by Lyra's improvisation and leadership. They moved as one organism, each member exploiting the unique strengths of the others while compensating for weaknesses. Lyra realized this was what humans were best at, creating order from chaos, using ingenuity to turn limitations into advantages. Minutes into the exercise, the drones began to fall. One by one, Lyra and her team disabled them, moving with precision and speed no other team had shown in the Academy's history. When the exercise ended, the scoreboard displayed numbers that shocked everyone. Not only had they survived, but they had completed the simulation faster and more efficiently than any previous team. Whispers of admiration and astonishment spread through the hall. Some cadets stared at her in disbelief, others in quiet envy. Even instructors could not hide their surprise. Zorath's eyes, cold and calculating, lingered on Lyra with a hint of something almost like respect. "You have potential," he said quietly as he passed by her. "Human, perhaps more than I thought." Lyra said nothing, letting the words settle. She knew respect had to be earned fully, not given in passing. That evening, she returned to her private training area. Sweat glistened on her skin, but her mind was alive with possibilities. She had mastered basic dual-wielding, but she knew there was more. She needed speed, precision, and creativity that would allow her to face multiple opponents at once, and perhaps even challenge species that had 6 or more limbs. Lyra spent hours running drills, imagining enemies coming from every angle. She practiced deflecting attacks while striking, spinning, and pivoting, moving in ways no one else could. The repetition was exhausting, but with each motion her body remembered more. Her movements became second nature. Her confidence grew. She began experimenting with advanced techniques. One sword became defensive, constantly guarding her vital areas, while the other became offensive, striking weak points with lightning speed. She tested how to redirect energy from one sword to the other, using momentum to make each strike more effective. It was like learning to conduct an orchestra where every instrument had its own mind, yet all played in harmony. The academy's walls seemed to echo her dedication. Hours turned into days and days into weeks. Other cadets came and went, attending regular drills, following the prescribed methods. Lyra went further, refining her skills, expanding her limits. Humans might be physically smaller, but the mind could compensate in ways the strongest arms never could. Her progress did not go unnoticed. Some cadets began approaching her, cautiously at first, asking for tips on timing, strategy, and coordination. Kor, once skeptical, admitted that watching her work inspired him to move differently, to think differently. Sierra adjusted her flight patterns to complement Lyra's moves, learning to anticipate attacks based on observation. Even Thal began experimenting with shifting forms more dynamically, influenced by Lyra's adaptability. Despite growing admiration, not all attention was positive. Some cadets whispered behind her back, calling her reckless, daring to challenge tradition. Lyra ignored them. She had learned long ago that fear and doubt were weapons, and the only way to wield them against oneself was to give them power. One day, an unusual challenge arrived. The instructors announced a new training exercise, a multi-species free combat arena where cadets would face off against each other with minimal restrictions. The goal was not just survival, but creativity, teamwork, and strategy. Lyra's heart raced. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She could finally test her dual-wielding in a situation where conventional limits were irrelevant. As the arena doors opened, cadets entered cautiously. Aliens with extra limbs flexed in anticipation. Energy beings shimmered, ready to phase attacks through defenses. Humans, few in number, moved warily. Lyra took a deep breath and held both swords. Her body remembered the countless hours of practice. She felt a strange clarity, as if her mind and her hands had become one. The battle began. Opponents struck from every direction, but Lyra moved like a whirlwind. One sword deflected, the other struck. She ducked, spun, and pivoted, constantly adjusting to threats. Her team followed her cues instinctively, moving in ways they had never dared to before. Each cadet adapted, learned, and improved mid-battle, guided by Lyra's ingenuity. Time seemed to stretch. The cadets faced chaos, but Lyra thrived in it. Her human instinct to adapt, to think ahead, to improvise, became their greatest advantage. Slowly, they gained the upper hand. Opponents who relied on brute force or rigid techniques faltered, unable to predict the humans' unconventional strategies. By the end, the arena was quiet except for the victorious team, panting but exhilarated. Lyra lowered her swords and looked around. Her team was smiling, laughing, amazed at what they had achieved. Even the instructors were nodding, a rare sight. Zorath's 6 eyes met hers once more. "You continue to surprise," he said, his voice quieter than before. "Perhaps human potential is underestimated." Lyra allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. She knew she had only begun. Humans had more to prove, and she would be the one to show them. Every limit she challenged, every expectation she defied, was a step closer to redefining what her species could achieve. As she left the arena, swords in hand, Lyra whispered to herself, a phrase she had now repeated countless times. "Define can't." And with every step, every motion, every strike, she lived that truth. The academy was buzzing more than usual that morning. Word had spread of Lyra's extraordinary performance in the free combat arena, and many cadets were eager, or perhaps anxious, to see her in action again. She moved through the corridors with calm determination, her dual swords strapped to her back. Eyes followed her as she passed. Some glimmered with admiration, others with doubt, and a few with outright disbelief. Humans had surprised everyone before, but the galaxy was not accustomed to being proven wrong so dramatically. The instructors had announced a new exercise, a simulated planetary defense mission. The scenario was designed to mimic a real alien incursion, testing cadets' ability to adapt under pressure, think strategically, and coordinate across species. Lyra's heart raced with excitement. This was no ordinary training. This was as close to real combat as they could safely simulate. She joined her team in the briefing room. Kor, Sierra, and Thal were already there, each displaying varying degrees of nervous energy. Kor flexed his massive arms, Sierra ruffled her feathers, and Thal shimmered slightly as it adjusted its crystalline form. Lyra felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Today, she would lead them, not just in skill, but in strategy. The holographic display in front of them illuminated the room with the image of a planet under attack. Swarms of hostile drones moved across its surface, and alien warships hovered above. The simulation required cadets to neutralize threats while protecting key installations, all within strict time constraints. Lyra studied the projection carefully. There were patterns to the drones, movements, weaknesses to exploit, and opportunities for creative solutions. "Team Human, follow my lead," Lyra said, her voice steady but commanding. "We move fast, adapt faster, and cover each other, trust me." The team nodded. They had begun to see her methods in action, and though they didn't fully understand the logic behind some of her decisions, they trusted her instincts. That trust would be tested today. The simulation started. Immediately, Lyra's dual swords became extensions of her body. One sword blocked incoming attacks, the other struck at weak points with precision. Drones came from all directions, their energy beams slicing through the simulated air, but Lyra moved like a living whirlwind. She ducked under an overhead strike while spinning to deflect another, simultaneously guiding Kor to a vulnerable point in the enemy's formation. Sierra swooped in, following cues from Lyra's movements, her wings creating openings for coordinated strikes. Thal used its crystalline form to absorb blasts and redirect energy, complementing Lyra's technique. The team moved in synchrony, a dance of offense and defense orchestrated by Lyra's keen observations. A sudden surge of drones descended from above. They were faster, more aggressive, and designed to overwhelm. Lyra's mind raced. She could not fight them all head-on. Instead, she adapted. One sword deflected attacks while the other created a rhythm, striking in unexpected angles that confused the drone's targeting systems. She called out directions to her team, adjusting their positions mid-combat. Kor charged with brute force, smashing through drones that threatened their flanks. Sierra darted overhead, her movements unpredictable and deadly. Thal created temporary barriers of energy, shielding the team and redirecting attacks. Lyra herself became the center of the storm, moving fluidly between offense and defense, turning what should have been chaos into a controlled, coordinated assault. Minutes felt like hours. The drones swarmed relentlessly, each wave more complex than the last. Cadets around the academy watched the simulation on hollow screens, jaws dropping at the display of human ingenuity. The alien instructors exchanged glances, some skeptical, others clearly impressed. Zoreth's 6 eyes followed Lyra closely, noting every movement, every decision, every tiny adaptation that allowed her team to survive where others might fail. Then came the surprise challenge. A massive drone with adaptive shields and multiple attack modes appeared, designed to test both skill and creativity. It was impossible for a single cadet to defeat alone, and many teams had failed before. Lyra analyzed its movements. Its shields rotated in predictable patterns, and its attack cycles repeated every few seconds. That was all the opening she needed. "Focus on its rotations," she instructed. "I'll draw its attention, strike with everything you've got when it exposes a weak point." The team executed her plan with precision. Lyra moved in a blur, drawing the drone's fire and dodging with unmatched agility. One sword blocked and redirected energy blasts while the other struck at joints, wires, and vulnerable circuits. Core delivered massive strikes at critical points. Sierra used her speed to attack from above, and Thal's energy beams disabled shields in key areas. Slowly but surely, the drone's defenses crumbled under the coordinated assault. Lyra's dual-wielding proved pivotal. She could block and attack simultaneously, exploiting openings that would have been impossible for a single-handed fighter. The final strike came when she spun, her sword slicing in perfect harmony, hitting the drone at its most vulnerable spot. Sparks flew across the simulated battlefield, and the massive drone collapsed in a cascade of energy. The simulation ended. The scoreboard displayed results that stunned everyone. Lyra's team had neutralized more threats, in less time, with fewer errors than any team in Academy history. Whispers turned into conversations, conversations into admiration. Even cadets who had doubted her skill now looked to her with respect. Zorath approached quietly, his expression unreadable. "Human," he said. "Your performance continues to exceed expectations. I see potential where I did not before." Lyra nodded, acknowledging the compliment but knowing her journey was far from complete. She had proven her skill, but real combat would be far more unpredictable, far more dangerous. This was only the beginning. That night, Lyra returned to her quarters, exhausted but alive with ideas. She laid her swords side by side and studied them, imagining future battles, new techniques, and advanced maneuvers. Her body remembered every motion, but her mind sought the next level of adaptation. She needed speed, precision, unpredictability, and creativity in ways that would allow her to face multiple opponents at once. Her training became more intense. She set up makeshift obstacle courses in her quarters, practicing rapid strikes, pivots, and blocks. She experimented with chaining movements, one sword deflecting, the other striking, then switching roles seamlessly. She even began to imagine fights with more than one opponent at the same time, envisioning scenarios where she had to anticipate multiple attacks from different angles. The human mind, she realized, was a perfect tool for unpredictability. Aliens relied on instinct, evolution, and physical advantages, but humans could innovate mid-fight, adjust strategies on the fly, and exploit weaknesses that no one else saw. That was their edge. Weeks passed. Lyra's skills grew exponentially. She sparred with every cadet willing to test her, and many who refused to face her openly admitted defeat in whispered conversations. She began experimenting with advanced techniques, one sword defensive, constantly guarding vital areas, the other offensive, striking with precision. She learned to use momentum, not just brute force, to make each attack more effective. Her reputation spread beyond her team. Cadets from other groups watched her movements, studied her style, and even tried to mimic her techniques. Some instructors began to incorporate elements of her methods into general training programs, recognizing that what humans lacked in raw power, they made up for with ingenuity and adaptability. But Lyra did not become complacent. She knew recognition was only a stepping stone. The real challenge would come when humans faced real threats in space, beyond simulations and holographic drones. One day, the galaxy might doubt humanity's ability to defend itself, but Lyra was determined that doubt would be proven wrong. One evening, as she trained alone, she paused to catch her breath. The academy was silent, the hum of the life systems the only sound. She held both swords, feeling their balance, their weight, the connection between her body and the blades. She remembered the words of the alien instructor who had dismissed her at the very beginning. "No species can dual-wield. Humans certainly can't." Lyra smiled softly. "Define can't," she whispered to herself, echoing the words that had become a mantra. She had not only learned to dual-wield, she had redefined what humans could do. And this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast and countless challenges awaited, but Lyra, with her dual swords and unyielding mind, was ready. Humanity had never been the strongest or the fastest, but it had something else: creativity, adaptability, and the courage to defy expectations. Lyra embodied that spirit, and she knew that one day it would be the key to proving that humans could achieve the impossible. As she set down her swords for the night, Lyra looked out at the stars beyond the Academy's walls. Each star was a world, each world a potential challenge, and each challenge an opportunity. Humanity had survived against odds that should have crushed them, and Lyra knew that survival was just the beginning. Victory was possible. And one day, the galaxy would learn that humans could do what no one else believed possible. The alarm blared through the academy, jolting cadets from their training and routines. The message flashed in bold red across every display. An unidentified fleet had entered the outskirts of the sector, heading toward a mining colony on the edge of civilized space. It was the first real test that would go beyond simulations. Today, Lyra's skills and humanity's ingenuity would face an authentic threat. The command center was chaotic. Holographic projections of the approaching fleet hovered above the console. Alien instructors and cadets alike argued over strategy, their voices overlapping in panic and speculation. Most had never faced a real threat of this scale. Lyra remained calm. Her heart beat steadily, her mind already analyzing every piece of data. Humans might be underestimated, but they could adapt faster than anyone else. That would be their edge. Lyra's team was assigned to a rapid response unit, tasked with intercepting the incoming threat before it reached the colony. Kor flexed his massive arms, ready to charge into battle. Sierra's wings glimmered with anticipation. Thal adjusted its crystalline body to a sharper form, ready to absorb and redirect energy. Lyra strapped her dual swords to her back, feeling the familiar weight settle in her hands. This was no simulation. The stakes were real, and failure would have consequences. The team boarded their sleek, human-designed interceptor ship. Unlike the larger alien vessels, the ship emphasized agility, speed, and creative design. Lyra smiled as they lifted off, weaving through the hangar with fluid precision. The pilot, another human cadet named Ryan, navigated expertly, relying on instincts and intuition rather than sheer size or power. As they approached the sector, sensors detected the fleet, sleek black ships bristling with weapons, moving with coordinated efficiency. Many species in the Academy would have been intimidated by such a force. Lyra's human mind, however, saw opportunity. Every formation, every predictable pattern was a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. "Team, stick close," Lyra commanded. "We're not trying to overpower them. We're going to outthink them." The first wave of enemy fighters swooped in, lasers cutting across the void. Kor's strength allowed him to deflect heavy blasts, while Sierra's speed created openings for strikes. Thal's crystalline form absorbed energy, redirecting it to disrupt the enemy's targeting systems. Lyra moved between them, dual swords flashing as she practiced the very techniques she had perfected in countless simulations. One blade deflected an incoming shot, while the other struck a weak point in the hull of a smaller enemy fighter. The alien ships adapted quickly, switching patterns to counter the team's maneuvers. Lyra's mind raced, calculating angles, predicting trajectories, and adjusting strategies on the fly. She guided her team through intricate formations, using the dual swords as both offense and defense. Every swing, block, and parry was synchronized with the movement of the interceptor ship and her teammates. A massive enemy frigate loomed ahead, firing a barrage of energy beams that threatened to overwhelm the team. Lyra analyzed its attack sequence. Its shields rotated in predictable intervals, but the targeting systems compensated with rapid adjustments. Humans might lack raw firepower, she thought, but ingenuity could compensate. "Split formation," she commanded. "I'll draw its attention." Everyone else hit the weak points when the shields rotate. Kor charged toward the frigate's exposed side, smashing weapons and armor with sheer force. Sierra swooped high, striking from angles that disrupted targeting sensors. Thal redirected energy blasts into the frigate's shielding, weakening it incrementally. Lyra moved in a blur, her dual swords flashing with precision. She struck openings in the rotating shields, her movements impossible for any single species to predict. Minutes felt like hours as the battle intensified. Enemy fighters swarmed, their movements fast and relentless. The cadets were exhausted, yet Lyra's leadership kept them coordinated, focused, and adaptable. She realized this was humanity's true strength, the ability to innovate under pressure, to see solutions where others saw only limitations. The frigate unleashed a final, devastating attack, firing a concentrated energy beam at the interceptor ship. Lyra reacted instantly. One sword deflected the beam, while the other struck the frigate's energy relay, causing it to overload. Sparks and explosions rippled across the enemy ship as it veered off course, disabled but not destroyed. The fleet began to retreat, their formations broken, their assault thwarted. Lyra and her team pursued, exploiting gaps and weaknesses with precision strikes. By the time the enemy ships withdrew entirely from the sector, the mining colony remained intact. Civilians on the colony sent messages of gratitude and astonishment, reporting that a small, human-led team had neutralized what could have been a devastating attack. Back at the academy, news of the successful defense spread rapidly. Cadets and instructors alike began to reevaluate humanity's role in interstellar combat. Where once they had doubted, they now saw potential. Humans, small and underestimated, had turned the tide of battle through creativity, adaptability, and courage. Zorath approached Lyra quietly in the aftermath. His 6 eyes regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Human," he said, "you continue to exceed expectations. Your species may hold potential that even I underestimated." Lyra nodded, but her thoughts were already on the next challenge. Real combat had proven her techniques, but she knew the galaxy was vast, and threats would only grow more complex. Mastery required constant improvement, constant adaptation, and the courage to continue defying expectations. That night, she returned to her quarters. The hum of the academy felt different now, quieter, almost reflective. She laid her dual swords across her bed and studied them. Each blade represented countless hours of practice, countless calculations, and countless risks. They were extensions of her mind, her instincts, and her determination. Lyra closed her eyes and imagined future battles. Larger fleets, stronger opponents, and unpredictable threats awaited. But the lessons of today remained clear. Ingenuity and adaptation were humanity's greatest weapons. Strength alone could not win battles. Creativity, strategy, and trust in one's abilities could. Her mind wandered to her teammates. Kor had proven that raw power could complement human ingenuity. Sierra had shown that speed and flexibility could exploit weaknesses. Thal had demonstrated the value of resilience and adaptability. Together, they had achieved what seemed impossible, guided by the vision and daring of a human cadet. Lyra realized something important. Humans might never be the strongest species, but they could redefine the battlefield through thought, strategy, and fearless experimentation. Can't was not a limitation. It was a challenge, a word waiting to be overturned by action. She returned to her training the following day with renewed vigor. Her dual-wielding techniques became more advanced, incorporating lessons from the real battle. She practiced combinations that allowed her to strike, block, and maneuver simultaneously against multiple opponents. She experimented with timing, angles, and movement to exploit vulnerabilities in ways no other species had imagined. Other cadets began seeking her out for guidance. Some were cautious, others eager to learn, but all were curious. Lyra shared her insights not out of pride, but to prepare them for the battles ahead. She understood that leadership was not about dominance. It was about inspiration and empowerment. Despite growing recognition, resistance persisted. Some instructors and cadets still clung to tradition, skeptical of human methods. They argued that humans relied too much on improvisation and lacked the raw strength to compete. Lyra welcomed the skepticism. It motivated her, pushed her to refine her skills, and reinforced her belief that action, not words, would define her species' potential. One day, an urgent communication arrived from the Academy Council. A new threat loomed, this one larger and more unpredictable than anything they had faced before. Lyra and her team were called upon to respond immediately. The stakes were higher, and failure was not an option. As she prepared her dual swords and coordinated with her team, Lyra felt the familiar rush of anticipation. This was the path she had chosen, the challenge she had embraced. Humanity's ingenuity would be tested again, and she was ready. The galaxy might doubt them, fear them, or underestimate them, but Lyra knew the truth. Humans were capable of the impossible, and she intended to prove it, one battle at a time. She stepped onto the launch pad, swords in hand, and looked out at the stars stretching endlessly before her. Each point of light represented a world, a challenge, a possibility. And for the first time, she felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a promise. A promise that humans could not only survive but thrive, even in a galaxy that doubted them. Lyra adjusted her grip on her swords. The enemy fleet awaited, the future uncertain, yet she felt no fear, only determination. Only the certainty that humans would not be defined by what others claimed they could not do. "Define can't," she whispered once more, letting the words settle deep within her. And with that, she led her team into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited with courage, skill, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. The call came in the dead of night, urgent and grave. A massive fleet of unknown alien ships had entered the sector, moving toward a strategically important human colony. This was no simulation. This was real, and the stakes had never been higher. The Academy mobilized immediately, but the fleet's size and coordination made conventional strategies almost useless. Many species doubted humanity's ability to respond effectively. Lyra, however, did not hesitate. She gathered her team, Kor, Sierra, Thal, and a handful of human pilots and cadets who had trained under her guidance. They were smaller in number, less physically powerful than most alien units, but Lyra had learned to rely not on strength, but ingenuity, coordination, and speed. Every mission, every drill, every dual-wielding session had led to this moment. "Remember," Lyra said, gripping her dual swords tightly, "they expect us to fail. We'll use that. Predictability is their weakness. Adaptability is ours. Trust each other and trust what we can do." The interceptor ships launched into the void. Lyra's ship was among the fastest, a sleek human design optimized for agility rather than brute force. As they approached the fleet, the sheer scale of it became clear. Hundreds of vessels, bristling with weapons and coordinated like a single organism, advanced relentlessly. Many cadets who had faced simulations looked pale with fear. Lyra, however, felt a surge of excitement. This was the ultimate test, the moment humans could prove themselves on a galactic stage. The first wave of enemy fighters swooped in, cutting through the void with lethal speed. Lyra's dual swords became her constant companions, extensions of her will. One sword blocked incoming energy blasts, while the other struck exposed components on enemy ships and drones. She moved fluidly across the bridge of her interceptor, coordinating her team's maneuvers as if conducting a battle orchestra. Kor smashed through enemy hulls with sheer force, creating openings for Lyra and her team. Sierra used her speed to dart between attackers, striking from angles no one else could reach. Thal manipulated its crystalline form to absorb and redirect attacks, protecting the weaker human pilots. Lyra herself moved like a storm, constantly adjusting to threats from every side. The alien ships adapted quickly, changing formations and attack patterns to counter their tactics. But Lyra had anticipated this. She called out instructions, altering their strategy in real time. Her dual wielding allowed her to block and strike simultaneously, a technique no other species could replicate. She leveraged every opening, exploiting even the smallest vulnerabilities with precision. As they pressed deeper into the fleet, the enemy deployed massive capital ships armed with devastating energy weapons. Lyra knew a direct assault would be suicidal. She needed a plan, something no one expected. Observing their movements, she noted subtle patterns, slight delays in the ships, rotations, repeated attack sequences, and predictable defensive shifts. These small details became their opportunity. "Divide and flank," she shouted. "We draw them apart, hit the weak points, and force the fleet to scatter. Keep moving, stay unpredictable." Her team executed the maneuver flawlessly. Lyra led the charge, weaving between ships, her dual swords flashing in perfect harmony. One sword deflected incoming fire while the other struck exposed conduits and energy nodes. Kor rammed into enemy hulls, causing chaos. Sierra darted overhead, striking critical points. Thal absorbed massive energy blasts, redirecting them into weak spots. The enemy fleet faltered. Their coordination was disrupted, and confusion spread through their ranks. Lyra saw the opening and pressed forward. She called out precise targets, guiding her team to exploit gaps that no other species could anticipate. Ships that seemed invincible fell under coordinated strikes. Cadets who had doubted themselves found courage under her leadership, their movements now synchronized with hers. A massive enemy battleship loomed ahead, the flagship of the invading fleet. It was heavily armored and bristled with weapons capable of destroying a small moon. Many would have hesitated, overwhelmed by its size and power. Lyra, however, smiled. This was exactly the moment she had trained for. "Focus on the engines and shield generators," she instructed. Kor smashed the side armor. Sierra hit the sensors. Thal absorbed the main cannon's fire and redirect it. "I'll take the core." The assault began. Lyra's dual swords became an extension of her body and mind. One blade deflected a barrage of energy beams while the other struck at critical points, cutting through the battleship's defenses. Core rammed into the hull repeatedly, each impact creating openings for Sierra to exploit. Thal redirected blasts that would have destroyed the interceptor ships, turning enemy fire against them. Lyra's team moved as a single unit, their coordination flawless. Even when a drone broke formation and attacked from an unexpected angle, Lyra adapted instantly, using her swords to protect her teammates while striking at the enemy. Every movement was precise, every action intentional. The battleship shuddered under the relentless assault. Minutes turned into tense hours. The enemy fleet struggled to regain control, but Lyra's tactics, her dual-wielding skill, and her team's coordination were overwhelming. The flagship's shields weakened, its weapons faltered, and its crew faltered under the unexpected ingenuity of humans. Finally, Lyra saw the moment of opportunity. The battleship's core, exposed after countless strikes and distractions, glowed dangerously. She leapt onto the hull, her dual sword slicing through the armor with fluid precision. Sparks erupted, energy arcs danced across the surface, and with a final, coordinated strike, the core was destroyed. The flagship exploded in a cascade of fire and energy, the shockwave knocking the remaining enemy ships into disarray. The fleet, leaderless and chaotic, began a full retreat. Humanity's small team had achieved what seemed impossible. They had defeated a fleet far larger and more powerful than themselves. Back at the academy, the news spread rapidly. Cadets, instructors, and civilians alike were in awe. Lyra's team had not only saved the colony but had demonstrated the unique potential of humans in combat. Where aliens had relied on power and instinct, humans had relied on creativity, strategy, and adaptability, and that had been enough to turn the tide. Zorath approached Lyra once more, his expression inscrutable yet tinged with admiration. "Human," he said, "your actions have proven what I once thought impossible. Your species is remarkable." Lyra nodded, but she did not let pride take hold. There would always be more challenges, more battles, more opportunities to prove humanity's ingenuity. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The mantra that had driven her from the start, "Define can't," had been realized in the most extraordinary way. The next morning, the Academy held a ceremony to honor those who had participated in the defense. Lyra and her team were celebrated not just for their skill, but for their ingenuity, courage, and leadership. The galaxy had seen humans as small, underestimated, and limited, but now everyone knew the truth. Lyra stood quietly, dual swords at her side, as cadets from multiple species approached her, seeking advice and insight. She smiled, remembering the long hours of practice, the failures, the doubts, and the moments when she had pushed beyond fear. Every swing, every strategy, every adaptation had led to this moment. The instructors who had once dismissed her watched with newfound respect. Even Zorath, the towering alien who had first told her humans couldn't dual-wield, now saw that the limitations he had believed in were not truths, but assumptions waiting to be challenged. Lyra knew that humanity's journey was just beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges far greater than anything they had faced so far. But she also knew this: humans had an edge unlike any other species. They could adapt, create, and defy expectations. And as long as that spark burned, there was nothing they could not achieve. That night, Lyra returned to her quarters. She placed her dual swords side by side, looking at them with quiet reverence. They were more than weapons. They were symbols of ingenuity, persistence, and the courage to challenge the impossible. She looked out the window at the stars stretching endlessly beyond the academy. Each star represented a world, a challenge, a possibility. Humans would face them all, not with brute strength alone, but with creativity, intelligence, and the unyielding belief that can't was only a word to be redefined. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the calm after the storm. Tomorrow there would be more challenges, more battles, and more tests of skill and ingenuity. But she was ready. Humanity had proven itself, not just in survival, but in triumph. And somewhere deep inside, Lyra knew that the story of humans, small, underestimated, and often dismissed, was only beginning. The galaxy would remember the day a human picked up two swords, defied expectations, and showed everyone what was truly possible. She whispered the words that had carried her from the first day of training, the words that had guided every swing, every maneuver, every daring strategy. Define can't. And with that, she rested, knowing that humanity's future was bright, limitless, and entirely in their own hands.